My name is Frank Moore. I'm from Cresco, Iowa, northeast Iowa, up near the Minnesota border. And we farm corn and soybeans on a strip-till system, and we're also getting into cover crops. And I'm one of the speakers here today at the first National Strip-Till Conference. And the topic today I'm going to talk about is how I'm working cover crops in with strip-till, and then some of the nutrient management things that we're doing. We farm about 2,000 acres, but I also have a consulting business. I deal with farmers that anything with government regulation and paperwork and agriculture, I'll tackle that as a consultant. The majority of my work is with DNR manure management plans, but I'm also a technical service provider that I can do work for NRCS and do those kinds of plans. So we've been doing some form of no-till now for 27 years. I started as a ridge tiller, then we shifted to no-till, and we've been strip tilling now for the last 4 years. The first 3 years we hired it done custom, and then a year ago a neighbor and I, we bought a strip till rig, and now we're actually doing custom work ourselves. And I've had a strong conservation emphasis. I worked with the Iowa Department of Agriculture for 15 years out of local NRCS offices doing water quality projects. So I'm always trying to see on the conservation side and controlling soil erosion, water quality, and how we can work that in with our farming practices. And the strip till, the no-till, the ridge till, those are all fine practices. They're helping to do soil conservation, water quality work. But the last few years we've had some changes in weather, some changes in climate. We're getting a lot more event storms, and it's just not holding quite the way it should. So we're trying to add now, what I'll talk about today is kind of the third leg to my conservation program, which would be cover crops. And there's just some areas that are just not holding. Normally you think, well, you need a grass waterway, but these are areas that grass waterways don't fit. Even NRCS wouldn't design a waterway in those areas. So I think with cover crops, my goal is to establish some cover in the fall that will hold through the winter and help control that erosion during the spring rainfall events. And I want to get a root system down there that'll hold that soil in place. Now, the cover crop, you got to terminate in the spring. My ideal would be to seed cover crop into soybeans, go into corn, and then by spring it would all be dead, but I've got a cover that's going to hold that soil in place. If you're a livestock producer, you're probably going to try to want to generate some forage. And so I found with the cover crops, it matters on what your goals are, on what type of seeding that you're going to have, and what mixtures, whether you're going to have legume or straight grass or a brassica, thing like radish. As far north as we are on a corn bean rotation, normally we don't start harvesting until around the 1st of October, a little later, and that's too late to get a cover crop established. So in our area we're going to be looking at aerial seeding, using an airplane, using a helicopter, or some type of high clearance machine. Now if you have livestock or you're taking silage off, then you could go in directly after silage and still have time get that cover crop seeded and get some growth before frost sets in. So that's just kind of a synopsis of what we're doing, corn soybean rotation, throwing cover crops in with a strong emphasis on conservation. It's that erosion control. There's some areas that just were not holding, and I'm not set up to do tillage. I have trouble when I acquire new land, either owning it or renting it, and we got to go in and do some tillage to get that field back in there. So I want to set up for a no-till system, and I want to be able to do it. Again, we get some areas that erode out, and I really don't have the tillage equipment to go back in and work it. So I think long term with cover crops, we're going to start to establish a root system, and we're going to be able to hold that soil in place. Plus, Iowa's doing this nutrient reduction strategy. There's a strong emphasis on the hypoxia zone and some water quality issues. I think with cover crops, we're going to absorb those nutrients, we're going to hold them in place, then they'll be released later that the crop can actually use it, and it's not going downstream. And that's going to be economically and environmentally sound.